In March 2022, there was a month-to-month increase in security incidents and fatalities, as well as kidnappings. Well, that's according to Beacon Security report. In the third month of the year, Nigeria recorded 428 incidents that resulted in 702 abductions and 1,497 fatalities, affecting 217 local government areas in 35 states.
A month-to-month analysis of the changes in the figures recorded in February 2022 and March 2022 showed a 40.1% increase in kidnappings and a 68.8% increase in fatalities. A comparison of the incidents that occurred in March 2021 and March 2022 shows a 144% rise in incidents, abductions, and fatalities.
Well, joining us to take a further look at the insecurity situation in the country, here in Lagos, we have Dr. Kabiru Adamu, security consultant, Beacon Securities Limited. Dr. Kabiru, thank you for joining us. We also have from our Abuja studios, retired Commissioner of Police, Emmanuel Ojukwu.
Thank you very much, CP Ojukwu. Thank you so much for joining us. Virtually, I'm also being told that we have Major General Augustine Agundo, Special Advisor to the Governor of Plateau State and former Theatre Commander of Operation A Safe Haven, joining us virtually. General, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program. Well, while we're waiting for the General, I think we're going to start with our two guests in studio. Dr. Adamu, there are a lot of statistics here. And you listened to what the CDS said a bit earlier, that for every one that is reported that we, the media, supposedly feast on and so on, there are dozens that have been foiled. Is that a fair comment on his part? And are those who are focusing on the failures as opposed to the successes being unfair to the military and the security agencies generally?
Ladi, do I have immunity here?
Yeah, you do.
You're asking me to analyze the statement of a general.
Indeed. Well, there are two other generals joining us on the panel, so your immunity will need to stretch.
Well, on a serious note, I'm aware of the incident the CDS mentioned, the one that happened in Kano when a vehicle was recovered. The vehicle was loaded with IEDs, and it was traveling from Jigawa to Kano. And given the population of Kano, if that vehicle had been delivered, most likely to a gathering of perhaps a substantial number of persons, the story would have been different today. So yes, to that extent, I think the security forces, the generality of them, are working to prevent certain incidents. But I think the onus is on them to communicate their successes to Nigerians. What Nigerians feel is the number of deaths that happened. In your earlier report, you mentioned that in 2021, about 9,000 people died. This is also documented in my consultancy. 9,000 people, Nigerians, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters. So rightly, Nigerians are not happy with the security situation. And I think while the military is preventing some of these incidents, it's also the responsibility of the entire security sector to report the successes in a manner that Nigerians would appreciate and understand, so that 9,000 is dropped to a number that I think would show Nigerians. If we drop it to, let's say, even 1,000, Nigerians would still complain. If we drop it further to 100, Nigerians perhaps would be happier. And so it's a way, it's a means between communicating successes as well as preventing the occurrences that we're seeing. And I agree totally with the CDS that it's a responsibility that must be taken up by both the security sector organizations as well as Nigerians as a whole. Sharing information when you see and hear development, as well as the protection for the sharing of that information, is the responsibility of perhaps both sides. Indeed,
better said before you jump in. I think Major General Henry Ayola, former Chief of Defense Research and Development, has joined us in our Abuja studios. General, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ladi. Thank you for having me. Good day, viewers.
Thank you. And my question is to Mr. Ojukwu, retired Commissioner of Police. And this is if you're surprised by the scale of attacks that we've seen in the last 1 year.
Well, every right-thinking Nigerian will be not just surprised, be concerned and be alarmed at the rising increase in crimes, not just attacks, other violent crimes. Because these things are having a lot of impact on economic development, having a lot of impact on population, social life, and a good number of other things. So every Nigerian says a no to violent crimes. I do know that the police and other security agencies are doing quite a lot to stem the tide in criminality and in violent crimes. A lot of results have been achieved. A lot of activities have been prevented from happening, but a good number still do happen, and the Nigerians are alarmed. Rightly so, because everybody wants to protect life and property, and so anything that happens that is detrimental to social development, economic growth, and normal flow in life, in property, is of concern to everybody, to me, and to every well-meaning Nigerian. But I do know a lot is being done to keep them in check.
If I may, Major General Ayola, we've seen a number of improvised explosive devices used. I think we saw that in Taraba, and this is apart from what we witnessed in Ondo State. What do you make of this dimension of violence?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I had an occasion to talk about this a few days ago. If we recall vividly that between 2009 to about 2014, this pattern was very common. I mean, that was at the beginning, following the death of Mohammed Yusuf, when Boko Haram went all out violent. This was their initial modus operandi, at that time, bombing, using vehicles to do counter-strike effect bombing, human-borne IEDs and all of that. That was how they started before they graduated into actually engaging the military forces and then eventually settling in the Sambisa forest and all of that. So it's like going back to that modus operandi. So it's actually not strange when we look at it from that perspective. But then it then tells you that we could see it as a resurgence of an old tactics, And so perhaps what we did then to curb that before they changed tactics, we have to revisit that and see how to also deal with it decisively this time around.
That this is Boko Haram return, or Boko Haram now in as ISWAP?
Oh, okay. Well, when we say ISWAP, I think we need to also remember ISWAP started as a faction of Boko Haram. It was actually a breakaway faction of the mainstream Al-Banawi sect that was actually initially led by the son of Mohammed Yusuf, Abu Musab. So it was a breakaway from the Shekau's faction. So there's really not much difference between ISWAP and Boko Haram. The major difference is the name, and because when they broke away, then they swear allegiance to ISIS, and that's why they became, Islamic State West African province. So there's really much. Perhaps the difference between them is a little ideological difference as to how violent they are to population, places, and when they do their operation. They had more consideration about population-centric operations, whereas the Shekau faction were not that considerate. And then they were known also to be very more friendly with the locals when they capture a place. Those are the few differences between them. Other than that, in terms of ideology, modus operandi, they are virtually the same.
Dr. Adamu, in trying to talk about this, I've listened to quite a number of people talk, and they say that these attacks are not necessarily random as we look at them like laymen. Someone I listened to on one of the programs said virtually everywhere you have the attacks, whether it's in the north or in the southern part of the country, there's a certain attachment to some sort of resource. Create some chaos there while the authorities are concerned about that chaos. Those people can get on with the business of illegal mining or extracting of those resources. In the case of Owo and Ondo, someone mentioned the idea of bitumen. In Zamfara, we had heard the whole idea about gold and all of that. And that in the northeast, when it became likely that we would get oil, that also sparked some. If this is true, how come we are not reacting to that? We are not being proactive if we know? First of all, is it true? And if so, why are we not reacting?
So let me avoid falling into the fray of the narrative. There is a conspiracy theory that is going around, and unfortunately that conspiracy theory has gained a lot of traction. So let me not fall into that trap of responding and then falling into it. Okay. Into it. What I would say is this: the answer to solve whatever it is in intelligence. And I'm happy with the question you earlier asked the CDS. We need to enhance the capability of our intelligence agencies. And to do that, we need to ensure that there is some level of accountability within the entire security architecture. Now, we have organizations that are whose mandate is purely for intelligence, and there are about 4 of them. Then for every of the security organizations, about, if you add the 4, about 23 more, each of them have an intelligence arm. Now, unfortunately, because of our history and some other internal structural issues that they are not working together as one. So you have them operating in silos. You have sometimes unhealthy competition between them. Now, there are 2 things that are key to intelligence. That is to detect and then to understand. If you are able to detect and understand, then you can prevent. But in our own case, I see over time, and I've studied security, I've worked security in Nigeria for about 30 years, that this is the crux of the matter. We, for some certain reasons, fail to detect, and even when we detect, we fail to understand. And because you don't understand, it will be difficult for you to prevent. The earlier question you asked the general, ISWAP, for a couple of months now, based on the intelligence that I work in commercial intelligence, and this is not state intelligence, but it gives me the ability to see and understand these trends. So we knew, for instance, that ISWAP was expanding its territory from its traditional base in the Lake Chad area, Borno, Yobe, into other parts of Nigeria. And the one that worried me was Kogi State. From around February, we saw a couple of bombing incidents in Kogi State. So what did I do? I put a simple protractor in Kaba and drew a cycle around Kaba. And every area that fell into that was vulnerable to attack. Now, if I was in public security, what I would do is to reach out to every unit within those states that were within that cycle and tell them, look, you're likely to be attacked. And this is what you should do to prevent the attack. And what are the targets? And that this is where I differ a little bit from General, I think, Ayola. We can play roles in preventing these attacks. There is counter-terrorism, which is the role of government. Then there is anti-terrorism, which is the role of you and I. Now, churches, as an example, mosques in those locations, they are soft targets. How do we enhance the physical security measures within those churches and then within the mosque and other vulnerable locations? So those are the kind of intelligence-driven reactions that I'm hoping to see. That even now, despite the fact that we're aware that there is an increased level of threat, in certain locations, I'm not seeing those necessary changes that would ensure there is a preventative, measures, especially along soft target. So the answer to your question really is intelligence.
Now, General Ayola, the military is at the forefront of this. There are those who have argued that the military should not be at the forefront of this, that it was a mistake of strategy to put the military at the forefront of it, that actually, because most of this involves civilians, whether they be bandits or you call them terrorists or whatever, they are civilians, and that the police and the intelligence agencies that Dr. Adamu just highlighted would have been better, because the military's primary mandate is to defend territorial integrity, and that now they are spread over virtually all the states of the Federation. the territorial integrity suffers as a result. Is that again a fair comment on the situation? And do you agree as a former military officer or as a retired military officer that it was wrong to put them in front in the first place?
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is a very critical question. It offers me the opportunity to clear this once and for all. I hear people say this a lot of times about either the military has a duty relating to internal security or not. I think there is a need to go back to the Constitution. The third function of the military mentioned in the Constitution is suppressing insurrection and acting in aid of civil authority, as they may be called out to do so by the president. So constitutionally, and even by training, the military is also trained to participate in internal security. Now, but this is how it works. Usually, when any crisis starts as just some form of criminality, yeah, the police operate the same way. You deploy the conventional police. If the situation gets bad and escalates, then it gets to the time you deploy the mobile police. That's how it's done. Usually, force is applied incrementally. Once a situation has degenerated or escalated to the point that is beyond the normal police duty, that's when the military is called out. And we've long passed that point, long past that point. That was how it was. In fact, on the plateau where I was commander of Operation Safe Haven, because it was all police operation initially, but when it escalated beyond what the police could handle, of course, that's what happened. Then the military is called out. So it's the normal, and even the military also operates that incremental way. You deploy your conventional forces. When it gets worse, then you start thinking of your special forces, and people who are trained to deal with specific kind of operation. That's the way it is. So it's not an anomaly in any sense. We have gone through that phase, and before it became clear, and the commander-in-chief will then call out the police. So it's not an error in any sense. Usually, that's why it starts that way and graduates that way. So that's what I would say about that.
Perhaps we'll also ask about integration of the security agencies in terms of intelligence. But I'd like to ask you, CP Ojukwu, to what extent does the police use intelligence in their activities?
Yeah, thank you very much. Right from inception, the police has always had an intelligence arm or a department that oversees intelligence and gives intelligence, actionable intelligence to the force to operate. It's been ongoing, and a lot of development has been put in place in that regard. But the issue is that the police over the years has not been given the wherewithal to develop its intelligence arm. You are well aware that when the NSO was carved out of the police e-department was kind of sidelined. But over time, the police realized that without intelligence, it will not be able to do its job. And once its job is not done, and there's chaos, there's anarchy, insurrection, as the military officer just mentioned earlier on, the military will come in. And that does not portend very well for the image of the police. So right now, as we speak, the intelligence arm of the police is being upgraded, is being retooled, being re-energized. A lot more officers are being trained in that area. And they've been able to achieve a lot of results in the areas of kidnapping. A lot of kidnappers, well-known kidnappers in this country, have been arrested and brought to book on account of intelligence-led policing on the part of the police. So efforts have been done to upgrade it, and all those things require a lot of funds. I do believe that even with the recent case of Owo, where the National Security Council asked the police to look for these perpetrators and bring them to book, that will require deployment of intelligence assets, and where the police are lacking in some areas, they may make some requests, and there will be intervention from the government.
And that's what we also heard from the Ondo State governor, who said the local network, Amotekun, wasn't sufficient in terms of equipment, and asking that there should be some sort of state police. Are you a proponent of that?
State police has been in the air for quite some time. If Nigerians so decide to have state police, so be it. But what we have right now is that the Nigerian police as president constituted, is operating in about 7,000 locations in this country. Every police formation you have in a state has like 90% of its officers from that community, or from that state, or from contiguous states. They operate. But what the people are asking for in state police is police that will be controlled by the state government and the apparatus. If Nigerians so wish, fine. But the police, as of today, operates and cooperates with local communities, vigilantes like Amoteku you mentioned now, because the police cannot be everywhere at the same time. They may not understand the internal operations of some of these criminals in those locations. They need the involvement of the communities in policing those communities. And that's about community policing and even state police. That's all well and good. But if you want to have a structure called state police, let the constitution be amended, and then Nigerians will have a taste of it, and then they will know which way to go.
I wanted to talk to Dr. Adamo, and this is in terms of, state police. For the Ondo State governor, he says state police could have, perhaps foresaw what happened. Is that true? Will that be the solution?
So it depends. The philosophy of policing itself requires a level of control by the very people that have established that policing department. And I think that is the missing element, even with the federal structure that we have at the moment. So if we decentralize and do not enhance democracy at the state level, then we're likely to have the same situation that we're having at the federal level. So my answer to your question is, how do we improve the democratization of our security agencies? And it's instrumental. Today is June 12th. We're speaking about democracy. How do we move the democracy from governance structures into the security organizations? How do we ensure the security organizations are accountable to us as a people? So that for me would be the only way. If we just move the same structure that we have at the federal level to the state level, and the governor has absolute control over the security departments, then unfortunately what is happening at the federal level will repeat itself. There are two key elements, I think. First of all, the utilization of the resources at the disposal of whether federal police or state police. Then the second element is the accountability measures that will be put in place for whatever policing arrangement that we have in place. Unless we work on these two, then unfortunately, I do not think the governor's recommendation would work for the state.
Now, let me come back to you, retired CP Ojukwu, and then General Ayola, I want you to weigh in on this same question, because when we have these discussions about security and we get to talking about what's the way forward, the solutions to this, we always talk about intelligence, knowing what's going to happen before it happens, so that if it's a bad thing, we can prevent it from happening. One thing that seems to become apparent is that when you look at it from other countries' examples, there are two groups of people who are very good with intelligence, whether they are in rural areas or they are in urban areas, and that is the youth, the young, because they move around a lot, and then fairly old people in the older generation who have not too much on their hands and therefore have a lot of time to observe what is going on, and because they've been around for a long time, they know when something has gone wrong. In Nigeria, those two groups, particularly the young ones, don't trust the security agencies, particularly the police. The trust deficit between the young and the police is as wide as the Atlantic Ocean. As a matter of fact, they don't want to have anything to do with the police. And more often than not, the interaction between the police and the young people is one of, as we saw with NSAS, brutality. That's the accusation. So if the young ones and the older ones who are doing the intelligence gathering without knowing it don't talk to those who are supposed to act on intelligence, what are we supposed to do?
Okay, thank you for that. If you look at the police as it is considered today, the top echelon of the police are like 20 to 30,000, while over 250,000 are junior officers. And these junior officers are part of the youth you're talking about. They also grew up from those same communities where you have the youth who are so-called civilians. So they interact extensively. They went to the same school, they go to the same churches, the same mosques, so they have a lot of interaction between them. This is that the youth of today are on a fast lane. They want to get there quick, want to ride good cars, have good technology at their beck and call. And some want to have quick money. By so doing, they get in conflict with the law. And the same youth on the part of the police are the ones to enforce the law. So issue of conflict must arise in trying to enforce the law. What we saw during the NSAS was that the police was just a metaphor. They were after the government, actually. People were fed up with so many issues in Nigeria, and because they see the police every day in every area of their operations, the police were the first victims, and the police became the whipping boy. There is issue of trust gap, which you alluded to, not just with the police, but with the elders and with the government of the day. The trust gap has always been there. And to bridge it means that we need to listen to people as they ventilate their grievances and act on them. June 12th, as we are marking today, somebody won an election and somebody annulled it. First time Nigerians went to cast their votes and they expressed their wishes. Somebody stood on their wishes. What we are saying is that if we are going to reap from June 12th as Democracy Day, we need to begin to allow people to express their choices, their rights, and listen to them instead of using a jackboot to trample on them and they may arise again. So the police and the youth, they do quite a lot of interaction. And because that about 60% of Nigerian population are the youth, the police needs to tap into these youth as avenues of information that could translate to intelligence. And I do believe it's working as the days go by.
General Ayola, your take on this?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's an area really I'm itching to speak on. Let me start from, I have two areas I want to talk here. First, about the increase in criminality and much more among the youth. I think there's an area we're overlooking, the area of parenting and the failure in that area. Because, you know, the law of harvest is that when you sow a seed, you reap multiple seeds. Multiple seeds. So what has happened is that the nation has gone through a cycle where you have had parents who perhaps were not well raised, now have become parents, and they are raising and having little or nothing to pass on to the generation of their children. And we are seeing that playing out. You know, it's so easy to deposit all of this responsibility at the feet of the security services. But I think we need to start from the homes, where parents should play their role, raise their children properly, the way they should be raised. Let there be values and ethics and character cultivation, so that the amount of delinquency in the society will be reduced. That's one area. The second area is the issue of the intelligence community. I mean, without trying to be an advocate for the intelligence community, but I see another gap there. From my own experience, I worked with some fantastic guys in the Department of State Services and, you know, the intelligence, you know, sector of arms of the police, of civil defense and all of that. And I see a lot of capacity in this community. But you see, one thing we also forget in that area, that no matter how good your intelligence community is, or your intelligence services and security services are, they are not the consumers of their products. The intelligence products are passed on to other first responders or other services and security services who have to implement, who have to take advantage of the intelligence to carry out operations. Now, when there is a gap in that connectivity, or in that connection in particular, it shows. So that even if you get the best of intelligence, let's take, for example, the police intelligence gets, you know, some useful intelligence and passes it on, and the nearest responder is a police station, and they don't have a vehicle to respond. you will be blaming the intelligence community, but they've done their job, and their job ends as dissemination. Okay, now if logistics are not there for the first responders to carry out their own part of the job, then the fault still goes back. But it has to be shared. So we need to look at the nodes and the joints within the security architecture itself and make sure we plug those gaps. It's only then that the work of the intelligence can then have an effect at the end of the day. And then we'll be much more appreciated. That's my take on that. Thank you.
We're ending this segment in just 90 seconds. So I guess that 90 seconds, Millicent, gives us enough time to thank our guests. There's still so much to unpack, but we want to thank all of you for participating in this segment. But
yeah.
Not everybody is leaving, right?
No, not everyone. Mr. Ojukwu, give us perhaps tell us in terms of security, in terms of democracy, consolidating democracy in terms of security now. Where do you see us going? What are some of the things that you want to see, you want the police to do? Your parting words as you leave us now.
Yes, I want to see the police be more teachable, more amenable to learn the rudiments of enforcing law and order in line with the dictates of human rights. The police job essentially is to promote and to protect human rights of Nigerians. So the police is the chief protector of this democracy that we are marking today. I expect to see the police more amenable to such teachings and to follow the line so that they begin to practice democratic policing to be in line with international best practices. And that is, I can see that coming quite soon.
I'm going to say the police is your friend, but I'll say it. Police is indeed our friend. Thank you so much, CP Emmanuel Ojukwu, for joining us today.